Good afternoon or good morning, depending upon in which time zone you reside. The appointed hour having arrived, it is now time to call this meeting to order. Executive Director Dennis Berkey, can you confirm that we have a quorum of at least 10 members on the call? Dennis? All right, looking at my list of participants, I can determine that we do have the sufficient quorum. And so I'd like to welcome all the American Institute of History of Pharmacy members and guests to our third virtual annual business meeting. And in planning this meeting, it couldn't help but strike me as unusual that 3 years ago, a bunch of historians would set the precedent for holding an annual business meeting in an all virtual format. It's quite ironic. We're usually not ahead of our time. Several notes before we begin. To reduce interfering background noise, we ask that you please mute your computer audio unless you are wishing to speak. And if you have a question or wish to make a point of order, please use the chat function located at the toolbar at the bottom right of your screen or the raised hand function at the upper right. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct business and share reports. And so, to that end, we will first hear reports from our officers. We will then listen to what promises to be a most enlightening lecture on a topic of significant relevance, and then conclude by conducting a number of items of business. And so first, it is my pleasure to introduce the members of the AIHP Governing Board. I am Clarke Ridgway, your president, residing in Morgantown, West Virginia. Our vice president is John D. Gravenstein from Easton, Maryland. Our secretary is Robert Berkey from Springfield, Ohio. Our treasurer, Holly Mason, is from West Lafayette, Indiana. Our executive director, Dennis Berkey, is in Madison, Wisconsin. Our at-large members of the board include Cynthia J. Boyle of Reisterstown, Maryland, Melissa Muir Corrigan of Iowa City, Iowa, Arthur Demrich of Silver Spring, Maryland, Gary W. Cadleck of Rochester Hills, Michigan, Angela Long of Eugene, Oregon, and Catherine Tagliaria of Boston, Massachusetts, and ex officio is Stephen M. Swanson, Dean of the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Pharmacy in Madison, Wisconsin. I will now call on Executive Director Berkey to introduce the staff. Dennis?
Clarke, it looks like Dennis is having some audio problems at the moment.
Okay. I'm going to move on in the agenda, and we'll come back to Dennis in just a moment. Since our last annual business meeting, two longstanding and outstanding members and former officers of the Institute have passed away. George Griffenhagen, a 70-year member, 50 of which were spent in a variety of leadership roles, died on November 21st, 2019. Griff, as he was affectionately known by several generations of pharmacists and historians, devoted his life to the development of pharmacy professional organizations and the dissemination of knowledge on a variety of historical topics in pharmacy, for which he was awarded the 2019 Robert P. Fishalis Award, the highest honor bestowed by AIHP. And secondly, Louis D. Votero, a 50-year member who served for over 30 years as AIHP treasurer, died on September the 12th, 2020. Lou was nearly single-handedly responsible for accruing the resources that have established the sound financial base that has enabled the Institute to weather a number of economic storms. For his tireless efforts on behalf of the Institute, he was awarded the very first Vaccination Award in 2016. And just this week, we were notified that Lou's widow, Barbara, has stipulated that Lou's share of the future royalties from the sale of his and Bob Berkey's textbook in pharmacy ethics will be donated to the Institute. More detailed information on their life and their many contributions to the Institute may be found on the AIHP website. In their memory, it is fitting that we now take a few moments of silence to honor their accomplishments and offer our thoughts of condolences to their families. Thank you. Dennis, do we have audio yet? All
Can you hear me
right.
now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, Dennis, we can. Would you please introduce the staff?
Sure. I apologize for the problems I had, but I seem to be back on. I'd be delighted to introduce the staff who are with us today, starting with the Historical Director, Lucas Rickert, who you'll be hearing from a bit later. Also with us and running things in the background is Gregory Bond, who has the titles of Assistant Director, Chief Archivist, and Senior Editor for Pharmacy and History. Also with us today is someone all of you know, Dr. Gregory Higby, my predecessor as Executive Director, who now has the role of Vaccination Scholar here at the Institute. In addition, with us today is Kristen Husett, who is an administrative coordinator for the Institute. Kristen is actually an employee of the University of Wisconsin School of Pharmacy, but she works for us as part of her duties at the pharmacy school and has been an integral part of our team, especially over the past year. And finally, I want to recognize our curator and program director, Beth Fisher, who is this year marking her 25th year as an employee of the American Institute of the History of Pharmacy. Beth is a extremely valuable member of our team, and she also provides us with great institutional memory. So thank you, Beth, for all you have done for the Institute for so many years.
Thank you, Dennis. Moving on to officer reports, I should explain that these oral reports are intended to be quite brief. And in all cases, there is or will be a more extensive written report accessible on the AIHP website. We will take questions and have discussion after all 5 reports have been presented. First off is Executive Director Dennis.
Great. Thank you, and hello, everyone. Again, I apologize for the problems I had a moment ago, but I'm very pleased to be with you today and to offer you this report. I prepared a rather detailed report that you can find on the website, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. At the Institute, like everyone else and every other organization, has had a very unusual year dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, but I've been very pleased with how we have worked our way through it. Our staff has been incredibly flexible in dealing with the issues that have come up, and I think we are proceeding without too much disruption. I wanted to briefly just cover a couple of things, and some of these items are going to be covered in a little more detail, either in the Historical Director's report or later still on the report regarding the journal. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of things, all of which are covered in more detail in my report, that I think are especially important for our members to be aware of. By far, the biggest thing we've worked on this past year has been revitalizing our academic journal, Pharmacy and History. Our work for renaming the journal and working out the details of our new partnership with the University of Wisconsin Press has taken a lot of staff time, but it's been a really rewarding experience. We are very excited about what's coming, and Luke is going to tell you a lot more about that a little bit later on. I also wanted to say a few things about e-scripts. This year, we achieved our goal of issuing 4 quarterly issues of the newsletter, and each issue has had in the range of 8 to 10 articles that provide our members with information about what's going on at the Institute. And we think this is probably our best way of letting you know about the kinds of things that we're working on, the kinds of activities that we're involved with, and also just trying to make you aware of other information that we think you, as people interested in the history of pharmacy, should be made aware of. In the coming year, I think you're going to see some additional changes coming to e-scripts. We realize that there's interesting material being published out there regarding the history of pharmacy that may be hard for some of you to access. And we're going to try to do a better job in the coming year of identifying that kind of material and providing you with links and other ways of accessing that information that might be of interest to you. So look forward to that in the coming year. In the area of programming, we had 2 really great program series this year that I think were highly successful. First, just in September, we finished the New Social History of Pharmacy and Pharmaceuticals Festival. That'll be covered a little bit later, as well will the Criminar series that we had last summer. I think both were very significant additions to our programming efforts in the past year. I wanted to highlight some changes that are coming to our awards program. Both Luke and I, early in our tenures in our new positions, came to see that it was time for us to take a close look at our awards program, that it hadn't been closely reviewed for a number of years. And so we worked with the board of directors to have a special task force put together to undertake that kind of comprehensive review. And that review process has led to some changes coming to at least 3 of our awards in the coming year. One of the things we identified was that the George Erdong Medal and the Edward Kremers Award covered a lot of the same ground. That they basically provided awards for the same thing, except that Kremers was limited to U.S. citizens, and the Erdong Medal was awarded without regard to citizenship. We thought that redundancy really served little purpose for the Institute. In addition, we came to recognize that the Erdong Medal was really evolving into a lifetime achievement award, and so we decided to just simply recognize that fact. So going forward, the George Erdong Medal will recognize scholars for their lifetime achievements in the area of the history of pharmacy and pharmaceuticals. The Edward Kremers Award will be our primary award for recognizing exemplary writing and publications in the area of pharmacy history and pharmaceutical history. But going forward, the Kremers Award will be awarded without regard to citizenship. Each of these awards going forward will be on different years. So going forward, the Erdong Medal will be awarded, I think, in even-numbered years, and the Kremers Award will be awarded in odd-numbered years. In addition, we've made significant changes to the AIHP Glenn Sonnendecker Prize. Going forward, that will become basically an annual essay contest, with the idea that the winner of that contest will have their material published in our journal once it goes through the peer review and editing process. We think this is a good way to encourage writing in the area of pharmacy history, but also in particular to promote writing by young scholars who might want to make a career mark by winning the Sonnendecker Prize. In addition, we think this new format of the award will allow us to generate content for our academic journal and good content for our journals, which is an important thing for us. Going into a couple of other things, this has been a year where we've spent a lot of time kind of assessing and making plans for upgrading and modernizing our historical collection. You're going to hear a little bit more about a couple of steps that we've taken in that area this year. I wanted to mention a couple of other things. First, this year the Institute has applied for a huge, for us, a $340,000 grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, which, if awarded, would provide us with a significant amount of resources that would allow us to make a huge step forward in making our a very unique collection available digitally to researchers and others around the world, which is one of our goals. These grants are very, very competitive, and there's no certainty that it's going to get funded, but we're hopeful that it will be funded. A tremendous amount of work went into getting it submitted. In addition, this year we've taken a huge step toward starting the process of digitizing at least parts of our collection. We've entered into an agreement with the University of Wisconsin Digital Collection Center, whereby they will start digitizing parts of our trade journal collection and also parts of our photo collection, both of which are very unique things that need greater access. And so this will be a multi-year project, but it is underway. And finally, I just wanted to mention that we're always looking for good, interesting new acquisitions for our collections. And I wanted to highlight this because I think maybe there are some of you out there might become aware of unique collections that are becoming available. And if you do, please let us know. We did just this past year, we took in a couple of new collections that I think made a nice addition to our archives. In the area of administration and finance, I wanted to highlight that we, like most nonprofits around the country, applied for and received a Paycheck Protection Program loan this year that helped us deal with the pandemic financial repercussions. And we just received notice last week that loan has been forgiven, and so basically it has turned into a grant. And then finally, we've taken a number of steps, both in terms of accounting and other things, to modernize our management of our endowed funds. We get a lot of our operating revenues through our endowed funds, for which we are very, very grateful. And we're taking steps to improve our management of them and to make our management more transparent so that people can see what's being earned and what's being spent. And finally, I just wanted to give a shout out to our terrific staff. I introduced them a minute ago. As I said earlier, they did a terrific job this year working under very unusual circumstances to keep operations going. And I very, very much appreciate their hard work and want you to know what a special group of people we have. Clarke?
Clarke, you're muted. I'm unmuting you now.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Dennis, thank you for that report, and thank you to the staff for producing an incredible amount of work under very trying circumstances. At his request, the report of the historical director, Dr. Lucas Rickert, will be given by AIHP curator and program director, Beth Fisher. And Beth, congratulations on your 25 years of devoted service to the Institute. You are a most important member of the AIHP family.
Well, thank you. I find it hard to believe it's been 25 years. Greetings from Madison. I hope you're all well. I'm Beth Fisher, the curator at the AIHP. It's my pleasure to stand in for the historical director and share some highlights from the past year. I'm celebrating my 25th year at the AIHP, and I'm excited to talk to you today. Just so you know, Dr. Rickert has recorded a long report for you to watch on the AIHP website, and I'm going to offer some key takeaways from that larger report. I'll also offer some reflections of my own. As the curator at AIHP, I've witnessed the Institute focus its activities around 3 pillars: programming, publishing, and collections. This past year has been memorable for many reasons, as you know, but it's been a period of change and excitement at the AIHP. I'll start with a straightforward slide that explains how we organize and think about the Institute's mission. As you can see, we have created 3 important facets of the Institute and operate around these 3 pillars. As it explains, we see our mission and our success at AIHP tied to strong programming, publishing, and collections. And you'll see that we've been busy in all 3 areas. The first pillar I'll talk about is collections. We have excellent collections that need to be more discoverable, used more often, and made more widely accessible in order to fulfill our mission. Everyone here, including the historical director, is working hard towards this end. There's been a lot of activity in the area of collections, and I will highlight 2 of them. We have developed and implemented the Institute's first collections management policy. The collections management team has found it invaluable as potential donors are cleaning out offices and homes during quarantine. We are also investigating a new collection software and database system and hope to have it operational next year. For more information about other collection-based projects on the slide, be sure to check out Luke's video. The next pillar, programming, was a real highlight of 2020. Our outward-facing programming and events need to be regular, broad in scope, accessible, and well advertised. The historical director has emphasized this since he arrived, and we really took giant steps this past year. The inaugural Kreminar, the Edward Kremer Seminar, was established in the spring and it generated a lot of enthusiasm and registrants. There were 5 separate talks, which with an average of 70 attendees, and now available on the AIHP YouTube site. So be sure to check that out. This fall, AIHP hosted the History of Pharmacy and Pharmaceuticals Festival. This was a major change to the way AIHP engages with its constituencies. The festival included over 30 talks and reached over 1,000 people across the globe. We also received strong positive feedback from pharmacists, historians, and others that attended the festival. The third pillar is publishing. AIHP has a long tradition in book and journal publishing, and this is near and dear to all of us. Luke is going to talk in more detail about the journal, so I won't go into this, but the highlight is that the AIHP journal will be moving to the UW Press in 2021. As the AIHP's journal moves to the UW Press, it has become crucial to reach out to the membership in different ways. E-scripts are online newsletters fulfilling this need, as well as the greater use of social media. Also, be sure to look for the AIHP calendar, which will be mailed before the end of the year. I have certainly enjoyed my 25 years at the AIHP, and I look forward to more years, perhaps not 25. There have been many exciting changes in the past couple of years, and I look forward to being a part of them, especially working with the collections. One of the things that has kept me at the AIHP all these years is my colleagues, or as I refer to them, my friends. Thank you to Luke for allowing me to talk to you today, and I wish you all a healthy holiday season.
Well, thank you, Beth. Thank you very much again for all your years of service. I think you started when you were a teenager, correct?
Oh, that's only a fun.
Okay. All right. As your president, it is a pleasure now to report. 2020 has been a year unlike any other in the life of our nation and our institute, and indeed the whole world. You know, we've experienced some of the worst of times as a society. And yet, despite working under seemingly ever-increasing and shifting limitations, the staff of our institute have displayed incredible resiliency and adaptability and productivity that are moving us forward in the pursuit of our missions in publishing, programming, and collections. Now, you've already heard many of these efforts, and we'll hear more very shortly. But consider the many changes that have taken place since our last meeting. To name just a few, the major changes in Institute print and electronic publications, more on that later, enhanced content and appearance of our website, development of a presence in social media, the advent of online seminars and a virtual symposium, and this latter involved dozens of speakers from countries all around the world, delivering talks on a broad array of topics, and this festival spanned 5 days, all done virtually. And toiling all the while under work-from-home restrictions, these incredible accomplishments all demonstrate the ingenuity and the dedication of Institute personnel, and yet more advancements are coming. Now, in spite of the upheavals taking place throughout the economy, our Institute has remained relatively unscathed financially. You'll hear more about that shortly. And remarkably, we have been able to retain all staff, and no publications or programming have had to be postponed or canceled. The importance of our mission is becoming ever greater in these times. The many changes impacting nearly every facet of pharmacy and healthcare must be chronicled and preserved. Just consider the exposed weaknesses that have appeared in the manufacturing supply chain and the subsequent distribution of medicines and medical supplies. The rapid response of pharmaceutical manufacturing of vaccines and treatment modalities. The pharmacist's role in the eventual nationwide administration of anticipated vaccines and pharmacies now serving as COVID-19 testing sites. The evolving interactions between telemedicine and telepharmacy. The impact of social isolation on health and medical use and misuse. Innovations occurring in the online delivery of pharmacy education, credentialing, and licensure. And the potential changes in overall healthcare delivery and cost, just to name a few. AIHP's role in all this uncertainty and change remains the same, however. We must be the agency to record, preserve, analyze, and disseminate all of this information for future generations of practitioners and historians. A major step in this direction has been the creation of our COVID-19 pandemic pharmacy historical documentation project. The Institute has already received many submissions, and I encourage all of our members to take part in and raise awareness of this effort. In addition, we must continue our efforts to highlight and preserve research that focuses on the diverse people and institutions that have been part of the development of our profession. Our publications, programming, collections practices must cover a wide range of topics and serve an audience that is broad and inclusive. To these ends, the board will soon be carrying out strategic planning to chart the course for future endeavors involving the efficient utilization of communications and social media, exploring our diverse past, and acquiring the financial resources that will be necessary to carry out such an ambitious agenda. Our Institute's board of directors and staff are committed to these endeavors, and with the continuing support of our membership, we will fulfill our mission of recording pharmacy's role in the history of American society. I thank you for your attention. We will now hear from our treasurer, Holly Mason.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we're getting a little feedback here, as President Ridgway mentioned, the financial health of the Institute is pretty stable. We have assets of just over $2 million, and both the last fiscal year and the current fiscal year, the revenues and expenses are as expected and planned for in our budgets. We did have a portfolio loss this past year of some $140,000 due to the turmoil with COVID, particularly in the beginning part of the year. We have made some of that up in recent months, however. we take a conservative investment approach that returns about 5% per year, and these funds are used to fund the majority of the operations of the Institute. All in all, I think we're in pretty good shape. I think that, as President Ridgway indicated, we need to look at ways to increase revenues and in the coming years, and that'll be something that's high on the priority list when we go into our strategic planning. So again, I thank you for your attention. You can find the full financial reports on the Institute website.
Thank you, Holly. And now moving on to our secretary, Robert Berkey. Bob?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Bob.
Okay. Very briefly, our organizational and business affairs are in good condition. We declined slightly in our membership during this past year. We lost 27 members during the past year, and we currently have 471 members as compared to 498 last year. We awarded 16 student recognition certificates during the past year, and of course, just a few months ago, we held our board of directors meeting, and again, it was held virtually. So that really is the highlights of my secretary's report.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Now, are there any questions or comments or discussions for any of our officers or their reports? If so, please raise your hand or go to the chat function.
Nothing has come in yet.
Okay. Or there'll be time at the end of the meeting for folks to bring items up too, if they so choose. It's now time to move on to the historical lecture component of our program. This continues a tradition at our annual business meeting of including a scholarly lecture, consistent with AIHP's mission of providing historical information to its members and to others. And we hope it creates more interest in and participation by members of the Institute in the annual business meeting. Our speaker today is Dr. John D. Gravenstein, retired Global Director of Medical Affairs for Merck Vaccines. John is currently AIHP Vice President. He holds a pharmacy degree from Duquesne University, a master's in education from Boston University, and a PhD in epidemiology from the University of North Carolina. And most notably, he was recently awarded APHA's 2020 Remington Honor Medal for his decades of excellence as a leader in promoting public health and wellness through immunization practice by pharmacists. We are indeed fortunate to have such a notable speaker on such a timely topic, and that is applying history's lessons to contemporary COVID-19 vaccination. And this follows on the presentation he gave on vaccine successes, crises, and standards during the Social History of Pharmacy and Pharmaceuticals Festival that was held in late September. So Dr. Gravenstein, we look forward to your presentation. John, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Does that work?
We can hear you now.
Okay, apologies for that. Greg offered me a test session and I declined it, so shame on me. Let me tell you to start how much fun it has been to be on the board. Because the other directors are pretty cool people, but the staff and management are just stellar in their individual skills. And just to Beth on her anniversary. In August, I was able to go into a little bit more depth on some of the things I'm going to cover today, but I didn't bring it into context with today's pandemic, and that's the focus I'm going to take now. This is what the current burden of the disease is, and any scientist would have been able to say, no, the pandemic is not going to go away on the day after the election. And in fact, yesterday apparently was the highest case count the country has recorded yet. These blips have been described as waves. They're epidemiologically, they're more like surges, or if you're a musician, I think we're rising to a crescendo, which is really bad news because it's not music, it's human suffering. So what can we learn from history that we can apply to today's situation? Well, vaccines must be the safest of all medications. That's society's expectation. They are given to healthy people to keep them healthy. And because of that, vaccines are studied in the largest populations of any drug. And then they are forever subjected to ongoing safety surveillance that is just gets more and more intricate as more of science is able to, more scientific methods are able to be applied to them. What I thought I would do is take 5 themes and walk you through each of them that apply to vaccines in the United States, but in the world, really. There have been production accidents. There have been adverse reactions. The society has rejected vaccines. I want to talk not just about vaccines, but also about antibody products, because that's interesting too. And then these are medical interventions that exist in the world of society. And so therefore, there's some military elements, but more to the point, there are political aspects that live as these products live in our society or are employed in our society. So let me start by talking about the production accidents, and I went through a longer list of them back in August, but I want to talk about how the accidents have led to responses, to scrutiny of the manufacturing processes and the source materials that only ever gets more and more scrupulous, more scrutiny, more intricate. So in 1901, there was diphtheria antitoxin that was contaminated with tetanus spores and children died. There was smallpox vaccine that was contaminated with tetanus spores and children died. And these tragedies led the US Congress to adopt the first organized regulation in the United States to control any medication at all. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 came 4 years later after Sinclair Lewis and all that, you know the story. But 4 years before that, vaccines and antibody products, viruses, serums, toxins, and analogous products were regulated. And what they required was a license to be renewed annually, and that there would be unannounced government inspections. And the licenses looked like college diplomas. They were issued by the Laboratory of Biological Products, which was part of the Department of Treasury. And you can see this is a 1909 license issued to the H.K. Mulford Company, which was the predecessor company of Merck. And here you see the authorized products handwritten in. There are many military history stories of how vaccines have been valuable. And I take you to the Spanish-American War with no vaccine against yellow fever, and contrast that with World War II with an early vaccine with a tremendous reduction in the number of cases, despite millions of military personnel being sent into yellow fever endemic zones. But the heart of this story was an unrecognized contamination of the early product with albumin harvested from human serum that had not been heat treated, and allowed hepatitis A, hepatitis B virus to persist in the product, and therefore infect active hepatitis B virus, and therefore infect at least 50,000 people, 50,000 troops with that virus. This helped to differentiate hepatitis A from hepatitis B, because this is, of course, 70 years ago, or 80 years ago. And it was also realized that the chicken eggs in which this vaccine had been produced were infected with an avian virus. Now, that didn't cause any harm, but this is, you know the expression of adventitious agents. And the result was increasing manufacturing standards to scrutinize not just the production process, but the source materials and the screening process to confirm not just the identity of the source materials, but any hitchhiker viruses that might be passing through it. So I was trying to figure out how to show visually all of the intricate controls that in the modern era, the FDA imposes and the European Medicines Agency imposes, and a variety of regulators in Japan and Australia and many other countries, that they impose for product quality. And this is the duties, the responsibilities of one little piece of the FDA in terms of, did you know that every lot of every vaccine is individually released, unlike small molecule medications? And so just an intricate requirement. One of the center directors of the FDA was interviewed a couple of weeks ago. He was talking about vaccine applications for vaccine licenses for the coronavirus vaccines that the FDA will receive, presumably, pretty soon. And he commented that the size of the application was over 100,000 pages long, because basically they get a case report on every volunteer in every trial. If the FDA wants to rearrange the analyses, they have the raw data with which to do it. How else visually show the intricacy of the contemporary manufacturing standards? This is just some guidance, the titles of guidance to industry documents and FDA rules in the last several years. And you can see that all the different ways that FDA controls the manufacturing process, the conduct of clinical trials, and all the other aspects of vaccine development. Let me move on to adverse events. When vaccine people talk about adverse events to avoid any assumption of cause and effect. If it's a true cause and effect relationship, we would say adverse reaction. And both are true, both have occurred after vaccines, some coincidental effects and some truly cause and effect related events. But the result of both of those is a ever more intricate safety surveillance program for early detection and for adjudication of whether a mirage or any given event is a mirage, not true, or a true cause and effect relationship. And I use the example of the Salk polio vaccine. This is a cover of Life magazine from April of 1955. Rush, let's get this vaccine out there. And then there was the Cutter incident in a book Paul Offit has described in considerable detail. 50 cases of polio that was directly caused by not following Jonas Salk's recipe carefully enough. And so some of the virus was caught up in a filter, and some live virus got transferred into the actual vaccine product. So 56 people were harmed directly by the vaccine. But curiously, from a societal perspective, there were hundreds more cases that were caused because the vaccine program was stopped. And so the epidemic of the disease at the time could continue unabated. And that clearly will have bearing on people saying in December, well, there's not enough safety information about that COVID vaccine. well, how many more cases of COVID infection will occur because we haven't been satisfied that there's been enough safety data? Here's a great case of a coincidence and a cause and effect relationship. So swine flu vaccination program in 1976. In January of 76, there was 1 death, 13 hospitalizations. There was a major program mobilized, the biggest vaccination program ever to that point. Well, there was a signal of 3 people getting the vaccine and dying of a heart attack on the same day. The 3 people died of the heart attack on the same day. All 3 people died several hours after vaccination. And the concern was, oh no, this is a horrible side effect. Newspaper headlines and all that. But nobody had stopped to compare how many heart attacks happened in Pittsburgh on any given day, heart attack deaths at that point. And it was way more than 3. And so this is the cautionary tale of what are you comparing the adverse event to? What's the background rate? What's expected, even in the absence of a vaccination program? This one was a mirage. It was not true, not a true cause and effect relationship. But there was a cause and effect relationship realized with the swine flu vaccine and Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a neuromuscular paralytic condition, at about 4 times the unvaccinated rate. It's not that we would expect any vaccine to have some degree of Guillain-Barré syndrome follow it because it happens in unvaccinated people. It's the 4 times higher part that was the confirmation that this was a true cause and effect relationship. What's the situation now? These are 2 different descriptions of the vaccine safety monitoring programs conducted by the FDA. Theirs is the adverse event reporting system. It's a spontaneous, it's the vaccine counterpart to MedWatch, if you're familiar with that. It's anybody can send in a product complaint or a report of an individual event. As an epidemiologist, I know the greater scientific power is over in the vaccine safety data link, which uses database to compare millions of vaccine recipients to millions of non-recipients, and so be able to tease apart coincidence from cause and effect. There's also this one, this VSafe is a new one. It's going to be a cell phone-based telemonitoring system for people who get the COVID vaccines to let them provide, with newer technologies, the ability to send in more information. This blue box over here is a different web page from CDC. They have a listing the existing safety monitoring programs. These are all the normal things that happen every day in the background. You probably didn't know about it, and they're going to do more. And so how did we learn from history? How did the CDC learn from history? It's that they've got to be on top of it and be able to tell people what's true and what's a mirage. Let's go to public communication, which in the negative is rejection. And hopefully by explaining things, we can get to acceptance. This is what the internet looked like in 1802. This was a broadsheet where Jenner's cowpox vaccine was accused of causing cow parts to grow out of various parts of your body and to insult the vaccine. And the internet brings us this and more on every vaccine made now globally at the speed of light. And so how do we explain the value of vaccines to people? Well, let me give you another military example. This was from the Boer War in South Africa, what's now South Africa. British scientists developed the first typhoid vaccine. People boarded the ship on the way between England and southern tip of Africa and threw the vaccine overboard, akin to the the Boston Tea Party. So the British military made the vaccine optional. 14,000 soldiers took it. They had a 2% infection rate. The unvaccinated soldiers had a 14% infection rate, which amounted to a lot of cases and a good number of deaths from typhoid fever. And at the next war, 97% of British troops accepted the vaccine. So the question is, how do you get people to accept a vaccine and avoid the needless deaths? Well, communication is part of it, and maybe you're going to use Elvis and as they did in the 1950s to talk about polio vaccine. And somebody grabbed Harrison Ford to narrate a public service announcement to get people to apply for the COVID-19 vaccine trials. But you need to know who your audience is. Harrison Ford probably has less pertinence or fluency in an African American or a Hispanic or a Hmong population, or and so you need to match your spokesperson with the audience that you're talking to. And so there's a whole degree of communication sciences that need to be applied to explaining in a legitimate, non-fear-mongering, responsible way what science has to offer. Let me diverge and talk about antibody products before, because I think it's kind of cool. And the analogy I'm going to use is diphtheria antitoxin, which those of you who are history buffs will know. Well, you're all history buffs, what am I saying? The Iditarod, did you know that the Iditarod dog sled race commemorates the movement of diphtheria antitoxin from the port cities of Alaska out to where there was two different outbreaks of diphtheria out in the Alaskan bush. And so if you've been to Central Park in New York, you know that's Balto's statue, Balto the lead sled dog. And if you want to read something a little more methodical, The Cruelest Miles is a good story on this one. Tetanus also gives us a way of looking at the difference between antibody products and vaccines. In 1917, for World War I, tetanus antitoxin, which was horse serum that had a high concentration of tetanus antibodies in it, was the great advance. And so that was finally there was a way to treat tetanus in early cases of tetanus, or to give prophylaxis of people who had been wounded. Now, this is the origin of the term serum sickness for humans developing anti-horse antibodies, and so that needed to be taken into account. But the better advance was when tetanus toxoid, a vaccine, a modified toxin, came along. And so in 1941, as World War II starts, able to start giving that to the troops, and a much smaller number of tetanus cases, only 12 tetanus cases throughout all of World War II, unlike Germany, where the Luftwaffe, the Air Force, gave tetanus toxoid, but the German army did not, and a much different rate of disease. I've got two World War II dog tags over here. This is the name, this is O for officer, and his serial number, T for tetanus toxoid, a dose in 1942, a dose in 1944, next of kin. That's O for blood type. And it surprised me that there was no positive or negative there. And I went and looked at my dad's. This is my dad's dog tag, and he also has only the blood type, not the Rh factor on it. P for Protestant, C for Catholic, his T42, T43. So you can see that this is a very permanent, very crude, very durable immunization record. Where are we today? We've got these pictures. I'm going to make an analogy for those of you who are hunters between shotguns and rifles. Shotgun shells with pellets of a variety of sizes, and a rifled bullet and its ability to be highly targeted. And so this year, we've seen convalescent plasma locally collected, hyperimmune globulins that have a more measured potency, unlike convalescent plasma from several manufacturers, and then monoclonal antibodies. That's the analogy to the rifle bullet, very highly targeted products being developed, either perhaps with an EUA or still in clinical trials. But the point here is how we've gone back to some old style approaches and then harnessed biotechnology to try to get a more targeted approach. And so we can watch history repeating itself in a microcosm here. Okay, let's talk about vaccine nationalism, or better yet, collaboration, and see where things are going there. the story of George Washington in the smallpox vaccine, or sorry, variolation, slightly different, for the Continental Army. And the point was that a task force advancing on Quebec became ill with smallpox. They were not vaccinated. They lost over half of the force to smallpox disease. The Americans, lost the Battle of Quebec and retreated. And I argue that because of that, the British forces stayed in what was Upper Canada at the time, and Canada goes on to become eventually an independent country. If we had won the Battle of Quebec, who knows? We might that might be a U.S. state at this point, and maybe the British would be over in the maritime provinces or out of the continent entirely. And so the lack of a vaccine matters in military history. Today, you see a variety of countries. The United States has bought, or has contracted for, I should say, 5 times as much vaccine as there is population, partially because it didn't know which products would succeed or fail in clinical trials. It may be that they all succeed eventually, and the U.S. will have too much vaccine and will, then release it to go to other parts of the world. So the U.S. has been criticized for being nationalistic, for contracting for, trying to corner the market on vaccine for its people. Yet there's another way of looking at it, that those government contracts were the stimulus to say to the developers, we will pay your bills. So go ahead and take your risks and build your plants and scale up. And here's guaranteed money if it works. Or here's guaranteed money, whether it or not. And so that you can criticize it from a nationalism perspective, but there's also an industrial security element that is indisputably positive. There's a new NGO, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, that is trying to take, by means of something called the COVAX facility, to get countries to pledge money to pool their resources for invention and development, and then to help pay for vaccine for Africa, vaccine for impoverished Asia or Bolivia, that sort of thing. And so that's another social movement that will try to get vaccines to the developing world faster. And you see silliness out of Russia trying to get vaccines, licensing vaccines before they ever did. Well, they did do clinical trials in about 88 people and then licensed the vaccine, whereas the West is doing tens of thousands of people. China is followed more typical patterns for clinical trials, but is selling the vaccine in Latin America and in Africa, and using the vaccine as a wedge for diplomatic influence. And Russia sent its vaccine to Venezuela and places like that. So I hope I've given you 5 different ways of looking at how history informs where we are going today with response to the pandemic. We're smarter because of things that have gone wrong in the past. We know what to do better, and yet it's still a human enterprise, and we know that how the politics, the suppression of the CDC, the interaction of CDC and HHS, what the White House does or doesn't allow the COVID task force to do or say is part of our current situation. I'm going to skip those 2 and go to my close, and just encourage you all to wear your masks, get your flu shots, and read the evidence for the COVID vaccines once it's available.
Well, John, thank you for a most enlightening presentation. I will point out a copy of this lecture will be made available on the AIHP website. So be sure to send that to all those that were unable to attend today. Are there any questions for John? Well, John, I have one. What do you look on as the role of pharmacists in the coming national immunization campaign?
So you've seen HHS do a variety of things to empower pharmacists to be prescribers of the COVID vaccines once they're available, a variety of other pandemic interventions as well. And you saw in the press in the last week or two a specific contract with CVS and with Walgreens, the chains, to reach people in long-term care facilities where health departments don't have nearly as good a kind of access as organized pharmacy does. So the early days will be limited availability of supply, but once there's enough vaccine for everybody, I think you're going to see every vaccinating pharmacy in the country involved one way or another.
Okay. I see Cheryl Warsh has a question. Cheryl, you would unmute your computer. Cheryl, I think you're muted.
That better?
That's it. Very good.
Thanks for a really interesting talk. Just one preliminary point. As a Canadian historian, I noticed that every time American historians delve into Canadian history, it's all about how the opportunities they had to take us over and make us better. and we can debate that whether the vaccines would have meant we became Americans, but that's another issue.
Well, imagine the United States having to be bilingual with French.
Horrors. One of the things, I just want to ask you one thing. You mentioned your father in the Army. My mom was a WAC in World War II, and all the WACs were given the flu shot before they would dare to give it to the soldiers overseas, the men. And they all got horribly sick. And then they think, hey, this is too strong a shot. We better, lighten it up to give the boys. And I'm wondering whether the Army or any kind of compulsory group is part of the testing today.
So several stories. So it was the Army Surgeon General in 1941 that commissioned the research that led to influenza vaccines, and they were whole virus vaccines, unlike the split virus semi-purified vaccines we give today. So you should know that one of my jobs in the Army was to oversee 10 institutional review boards, 10 medical ethics boards for 10 different Army hospitals. And so the Army, it was the CIA who gave LSD to people. It was not the Army. The Army has a long record of abiding by all Helsinki Accords and the human research ethics elements. So there might be some troops somewhere who volunteered for one of the trials. I kind of doubt it because they also have to agree not to be deployed away from the clinical trial site. But they could have, but they would have had to sign the same consent form as anybody else.
Okay. Thanks.
And I see we have a question from John Swan. John writes, you mentioned the cases directly affected by Cutter vaccine, but there were a lot more cases, paralytic and non-paralytic, from family and community contact, about 260 in all. Perhaps small compared to the temporary suspension of the vaccine, but.
Yeah, fair point. I may not have spent enough time checking my numbers for that slide, so I'll double check and see if I need to toss another caveat in there. Thank you, John.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any listed in the chat. Kristen, do you see any hands raised?
Nope.
No. Okay, very good. Well, John, thank you once again for a very thoughtful and stimulating presentation. We are most grateful.
My pleasure.
Moving on, our next item of business, new directions for the Institute's journals. The report being given by Dr. Lucas Rickert, who is the AIHP Historical Director. Luke, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thanks to John for giving that talk. Always interesting. Thanks to Beth for speaking on my behalf earlier. I want to congratulate her again on 25 years of the AIHP. That's amazing. That's awesome. So for my short report here, I'm joined by Dr. Greg Bond. Together, he and I have been working very closely on the AIHP journal over the past couple of years. And so it's really my pleasure to welcome him. So look, he does a tremendous amount of work for the Institute, but in particular for the journal. He's so knowledgeable, and it's great to have him share some of his insight. Before I jump into that report, however, I want to make a plea to you, all of you, the members. We work for you. And so I would like to make a plea to you. I'd love it if, as members, you can share as much as possible some of the AIHP's achievements. We're working really hard on your behalf and for the Institute's behalf. It's got a wonderful legacy. At the same time, it's crucial that we get the word out. And so if you can connect through your networks and share some of the advancements that we're making at the Institute, that'd be brilliant. A second plea would be to encourage others to potentially join the AIHP. We're offering new incentives for graduate students, postdocs, retirees, everyone. So it'd be fantastic if you did that. But I also want to make a plea that you stay in touch with us as the staff who work on for you and on your behalf. We need to know where you're coming from and what you want. And, you can be in touch with us via email or on Twitter. You can get in touch with us many, many ways, but we want to hear from you as much as possible. And then finally, I just want to say, stay safe. On the heels of what John has talked about, please, I encourage you to stay as safe as possible. So those are my pleas to you as the members. And with that, I guess we're going to talk a little bit about the new directions for our journal. As you know, the journal was founded in 1959 by Glenn Sonnedecker, and Glenn's birthday is coming up right away. Here. I got to speak with Glenn in person, I guess, just over a year ago, and haven't been able to be in touch with him in face-to-face since, but he still is trucking on. And it's amazing that the journal that he established is going through an evolution. This journal that the AIHP publishes is a representation of who we are, and to be considered a research institute of the highest order, we need a strong journal. And so we're implementing some changes. And as Dennis said right at the top, it's a unique and exciting time for our journal. Way before I got here, the board of directors established a task force and then ruminated over what was called the Swine report. It's named after the former president of the AIHP and the current FDA historian, John Swine. And that document advocated certain changes to the journal. One of the changes was to modify its name. Another change was to associate it with a university press. And so that's what we are doing several years after that report. What's crucial is that the Institute is in line with the sector norms in the publishing world. So I've personally established an editorial board for the journal, which has been signed off on by the board of directors. We've established a wider editorial team to help myself and to help Greg Bond as much as we possibly can. We've modified certain editorial practices at the journal, changed some production practices. And so making these adjustments, the next step was working with a university press, the right press, mind you. We've made the case that it's vital that we work with a university press, profit press, and so that was the next step. My preference was, and there was agreement here and with the board of directors, that we should pursue a university press and establish a short-term contract. And the best fit for us was to work with UW, the UW Press. It helps us cement ties between the university and the institute. Of course, the university has acted as the AIHP's home for all these years, and so it was a natural and appropriate partnership to establish. I suppose another element of the story behind the new directions for the journal has to do with the name. Just as the Swine report indicated over 5 years ago, we needed to reconsider what the name Pharmacy in History projects about us as an institute. Does it represent a big tent? Does it encourage others to submit work and join the institute? Does it reflect the field itself? I believe, and others agreed with me, that other names better reflected the way scholarship is going in 2020 and better reflects what we actually are at the Institute. And so I think that the history of pharmacy and pharmaceuticals suggests to insiders and outsiders the breadth of the field, the breadth of what we do and who we are. So obviously, there are various implications to consider with such changes to the journal. And look, there's the financial side and the changing nature of our internal workflows and so on. But I cannot stress enough how exciting this is for us here in Madison. And how important this investment is in our reputation and our prestige. So I'll wrap up and turn it over to Greg Bond. I'll just say that I'm over the moon, really, that the UW Press is now publishing our journal. It doesn't absorb any of the editorial responsibilities, doesn't take away any of our decision-making power. It just enables us to deliver the best journal that we can to our members, which is you. So I guess with that, I'll just turn it over to Greg.
Thanks, Luke. I want to add one plea to Luke's pleas before I start my thoughts. In addition to getting the word out about the Institute and the journal and encouraging people to join and communicate with us, I would also encourage those of you who are affiliated with institutions, college, universities, have your library subscribe to the journal. One of our goals is to increase the reach of our journal. And one of the best ways to do that is to get our content, especially our electronic content from history of pharmacy and pharmaceuticals, in front of students, in front of researchers through academic libraries. So my plea to add to Luke's is if you're at an institution, please encourage your library to subscribe to history of pharmacy and pharmaceuticals. I just want to second pretty much everything Luke has said already, talking about these changes. I feel like I can speak for those of us who've worked at AIHP for a while. I've not been around quite as long as Beth Fisher's 25 years, and certainly not as long as Greg Higbee's many, many, many years. But I've been at AIHP for a while, first as a grad student and now as an employee. And I think we're also absolutely thrilled at these developments. And we're very thankful for Luke's leadership in helping to achieve these goals, these long sought after goals that were in the Swine report and also had been talked about at the Institute for years before the Swine report. So we're really excited too. I think first in thinking about the new name, the journal title, I'd like to say that Pharmacy in History, dating back to all of its previous editors, including Glenn Sonnedecker, John Paris Gondola, and then Greg Higbee and Elaine Stroud, they always published articles pertaining to both the history of pharmacy, that is the history of pharmacy practice, history of pharmacy education, history of pharmacy and drug law, as well as the history of pharmaceuticals, things like the history of pharmaceutical manufacturing, the social history of drugs, and other similar topics. So I think Luke agrees, and I think the rest of AIHP really look at the new name of the journal, History of Pharmacy and Pharmaceuticals, that you see here, as simply reaffirming this long-standing editorial policy. And as Luke mentioned also, I think the new title really helps to signal to authors and to readers alike the broad topical breadth that we're looking for the journal. And then secondly, as the current senior editor and the managing editor of AIHP's journal, I think I can very confidently say, after a couple months of meetings with the UW Press team and a much longer time of negotiations with the UW Press administrators, that this new partnership, this new affiliation has already really paid handsome dividends. After 60 years of self-publishing the journal, it's so fantastic. It's such a relief for me and Luke and the other people working on the journal to have ready, immediate access to the dedicated professional staff at the UW Press. Instead of us at the Madison office of AIHP having to manage and worry about every single aspect of the publishing process, the journal editors, I can contact them, Luke can contact people at UW Press. As Luke mentioned, we're keeping the editorial and the intellectual work in-house in Madison. We're responsible for that. But we can easily contact and confer with, for example, fulfillment specialists, marketing specialists, designers, library liaisons, and all sorts of other experts whose daily job is to help answer these questions, to help us promote the journal, to give us advice, to make the journal better and the best journal AIHP can publish. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think the rest of us AIHP are really looking forward to hopefully a very long and fruitful partnership with UW Press that will just continue making the journal better and better. And as I think it's very important that this helps solidify our really long-standing and very, very vital relationship with the University of Wisconsin. I think in closing, I'd just like to say that we AIHP see history of pharmacy and pharmaceuticals as very certainly a continuation of all the excellent work that's been done by the people who came before us, the previous editors of pharmacy and history. I think to signal this continuity, HOP, as we're calling it, History of Pharmacy and Pharmaceuticals, is going to maintain the volume and numbering scheme of pharmacy and history. So as you see here, the very first issue of History of Pharmacy and Pharmaceuticals will be volume 63, number 1, continuing the numbering scheme of pharmacy and history that Glenn Steinbecker established back in 1959. I think we're just really excited to begin this new chapter, so to speak, in life of the AIHP's journal. We're looking forward to building upon and advancing the important work of editors like Glenn Steinbecker, as I mentioned, John Paris Gondola, Greg Higbee, and of course, also building on the pioneering work of Edward Kremers and George Erdong, who first established AIHP and the UW School of Pharmacy as really important, vital, leading centers for the study of the history of pharmacy and history of pharmaceuticals. So I want to again thank Luke and Dennis Burke for all their leadership in making these exciting changes happen. And also want to thank Tony Gunnison, who's the journal's editor at UW Press, for making this partnership possible. So thanks for everyone for listening, and back over to you, Clarke.
Well, thank you, Greg, and so many thanks to Luke and Greg for all of their hard work on this very important project that they have undertaken. And we all look forward to volume 63, issue number 1. Moving on to the presentation of the Robert P. Fishalis Award. This award was established in 2015 to call attention to particularly meritorious and commendable actions that have had an important impact on the field overall or on the Institute itself. For 2020, a subcommittee consisting of directors Angela Long and Cynthia Boyle, and your president, reviewed the nominees and submitted the name of Robert A. Berkey to the board of directors, who quickly and unanimously approved the selection. Dr. Robert A. Berkey has been a member of the Institute for all 50-plus years of his professional life. During this period, he has published, taught, and presented on a wide variety of pharmacy historical topics and served the Institute in all manner of capacities. of utmost importance to the Institute and to the advancement of the history of pharmacy in general has been Dr. Berkey's leadership in the endowment of the Erdong Chair in the History of Pharmacy at the University of Wisconsin School of Pharmacy. This is the only such academic chair in the United States, the position that is currently held by Dr. Rickert. Bob's educational efforts have benefited students and practitioners and the general public. He's authored dozens of articles and several books covering nearly every aspect of the profession and enlightened the public through multiple efforts in museum work. In recognition of his scholarly writing, he received the 2004 AIHP Kremers Award. He has developed nearly a dozen pharmacy and health extended healthcare courses devoted to historical content. He's provided leadership to the AACP History Special Interest Group and developed innovative public history projects in the fields of pharmacy museums. He's presented at and moderated numerous APHA and AIHP educational sessions and panel discussions at the national level, and has devoted many hours to promoting the Institute via information booths and networking. Bob has faithfully provided leadership to the Institute by chairing numerous committees and serving in a variety of elected officer positions, including the past 15 years as secretary. For these and many more reasons too numerous to mention here, but can be found on the AIHP website, it is truly an honor and a pleasure, on behalf of the AIHP Board of Directors, to virtually present the 2020 Fishalis Award to Dr. Robert A. Berkey. Bob, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Greg asked me to hold up the award so you folks can see it. If you can get me on the not. If not, that's fine. I just wanted to thank you very much for the award. It's been fun working with the Institute. The Institute was the first association that I joined after graduation in 1963, and I've been an active member ever since. I think it's also interesting to note that the two folks that we honored today, George Griffinhagen and Luvo Otero, were also recipients of the award. So again, thank you very much for the award. I will continue to work with the Institute as long as I possibly can. Thank you so much.
Well, congratulations, Bob, and thank you for dedicating so much of your professional life to the well-being of the Institute. Thank you. Dennis Berkey, I believe you have a report on proposed bylaws changes. Do we have audio connection with Dennis?
Dennis is muted.
Dennis, can you unmute your computer, please? Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. After John's lecture on vaccines and honoring Bob, it's a little dull to talk about bylaw changes, but our bylaws are important, and our bylaws require members to vote to approve any changes, and you're going to be asked to do that in a couple of weeks. And so we thought it was important that we tell you a little bit about what you're being asked to approve. our bylaws are basically the constitution of our organization. It basically lays out who's responsible for what, who has authority to do what, and the procedures and processes that we must follow to operate our organization. So it's basically our constitution, and they're a very important part of a set of rules. We undertook this review of our bylaws primarily for one reason, at least at the outset, and that was that our current bylaws establish a process for nominating, electing, and installing officers that takes at least 13 months to complete, a ridiculously long time. So we wanted to revise the bylaws to simplify and shorten that process. But there was a couple of other things that entered into our considerations as we undertook a review of the bylaws. First, since the bylaws were last reviewed, the way we operate and govern ourselves has changed. When these bylaws were originally drafted, officers were expected to perform certain administrative duties in addition to serving on the board, and that's changed now. The Institute staff is responsible for the day-to-day administrative operation of the Institute, and the board's role is limited to setting the strategic direction, the strategic priorities, and overseeing our operations. And so we wanted to update the bylaws to reflect our new governance system. In addition, our current bylaws made no recognition at all about the fact that one of our co-leaders now is the historical director, and we thought it was important to incorporate that role into our bylaws. Finally, technology has changed remarkably since the last time our bylaws were revised. There are now new ways of holding meetings and new ways of communicating, and we needed to get those new modes reflected in our bylaws. And finally, there were simply several things that were omitted from our bylaws that typically are in bylaws, and we wanted to address those matters. I'm not going to attempt to review each and every proposed change. We have prepared a document that's online on the website that provides a detailed review and summary of the proposed changes. We've also provided there a complete copy of our current bylaws, as well as a complete copy of the proposed bylaws. So you can review all of those documents for a more detailed understanding of what we're changing. But I wanted to highlight in this presentation some of the most significant things. With respect to the rules regarding members, we are including language that will allow electronic ballots for voting purposes. And then secondly, we're adding a new provision that will allow members to call a special meeting of the membership if 10% of the members so request in writing. This is kind of a safety gap or a safety valve type thing that many organizations have, and we thought we should include that in our bylaws. Moving on then to the board of directors, we've consolidated a couple of sections of a couple of articles of our existing bylaws without making many substantive changes, but there have been a few. The most important one, I think, is that we're adding the historical director to our board of directors as a non-voting ex officio director. He has that status because he is not somebody who is directly accountable to the board of directors. Luke is a tenured member of the faculty at the School of Pharmacy. As part of those responsibilities as a professor, he also is responsible for serving as our historical director. We've also made a change to our term limit provision. We have a provision that requires that says that a director can serve for only 2 3-year terms. We're making an exception for that for situations where a current director becomes or is elected president of the institute. In that kind of situation, the director can serve as 2 additional 3-year terms in that role. And finally, with respect to the board of directors, we're adding several other relatively minor provisions, things such as what happens when a member, a director resigns or can no longer continue during his or her term, and things of that nature. Then moving on to officers, there really are no substantive changes here. There are changes in language that update the responsibilities of officers in some respects. For example, both the responsibilities of the treasurer and the secretary have been updated to reflect the fact that many of the responsibilities they currently had are now the responsibilities of the executive director. And then moving on to the matter that was of most interest to us, and that is a revised process for nominating, electing, and installing our elected directors. Let me say at the outset that most of our directors, including our officers, are elected by our members. However, our bylaws for several years now have allowed the board to appoint up to 3 additional people to serve as directors in order to bring special expertise to our board. And so we have filled those 3 positions with directors. These rules don't apply to them. These rules apply to those people who are elected. And as I said at the outset, currently our process takes at least 13 months, and we wanted to shorten and streamline that process. So under the revised process, our nominating committee will nominate nominations for upcoming vacancies on the board of directors at least 30 days before the annual business meeting. That information then can be conveyed to our members well in advance of the meeting. We are retaining the right that exists under our current rules for members to nominate additional people to serve on the board of directors at the annual business meeting. So currently our rules say that any member can nominate additional people for board positions at the meeting if that nomination is seconded by 2 other members, and that right will continue. One of the ways we're shortening the process considerably is that we're requiring the election of nominated directors to occur immediately after the annual business meeting. So shortly in the future, within weeks after the annual business meeting, the executive director will distribute ballots. That will happen primarily electronically, but for people who don't have email, we will continue to mail paper ballots. They'll be required to return ballots or vote within 30 days. We'll have a special board meeting shortly after the ballots are counted to actually install the new people. So we're expecting that, assuming, for example, we continue to have our annual business meeting in November, we should be in a position to install our new directors by late January or early February. So the process will be much faster. Moving on then to a couple of other additional matters. We are making just limited changes with respect to standing committees. Basically, the board of directors is retaining the authority to establish any standing committee that it so desires. One of the standing committees currently provided for in our bylaws is an awards committee. Under the revised protocols that have been established for our awards, the need for a separate awards committee has been obviated. a special panels will be appointed to judge nominations for both the Erdong Medal and the Kremers Award. Currently, our bylaws have no provision dealing with conflicts of interest that might arise for board members. And typically that is something that most bylaws contain. So we've added a provision that basically requires that if a situation arises where a director has a conflict with something that is coming before the board, she or he must disclose that and refrain from voting, a pretty standard provision. Another omission from our current board of directors deals with indemnification of directors and employees. This basically says that if a director or employee are sued because of action they took in their role as a director or as an employee, they are indemnified for any damages or cost resulting from that lawsuit. Again, this is something that bylaws typically cover, and in fact, this obligation exists already under statutory law. We're simply making it part of our bylaws in order to make it clear to people whom we ask to serve in our board of directors that they're covered against this sort of risk. So that's my review of the changes. What will happen next is a couple of things. The board of directors has already reviewed these proposed changes and has approved them unanimously. Our current bylaws require that members also review proposed changes and approve them by a 2/3 majority. In early December, we'll begin the election over this issue. Members will receive email notice that they can vote electronically on these questions. And again, we'll send paper ballots to those people who don't have emails. You'll have 21 days to respond. If the changes are approved, most of them will take effect January 1, 2020, except, however, the people who are being nominated today for upcoming positions on the board of directors will be elected and installed under the existing rules. They will not be affected by these changes. Clarke, that's all I have.
Okay, well, Dennis, thank you and all those that worked on putting together these changes very much. I know that was a very arduous, lengthy process, so we appreciate your diligence in that process. Moving on to the AIHP Nominations Committee report. Under our bylaws, provisions for staggered 3-year terms for board members. There's one officer position, that of president, and one director at large position will be subject to membership election for this coming year for 2022 to 2024 terms of office. This year's nominations committee was comprised of Director Angela Long, Dr. Greg Higbee, who's a current Fischela Scholar and retired AIHP Executive Director, and myself. And making the report of the committee is Dr. Higbee. Greg?
All right, thank you. And I guess I'm on. All right.
You are live. Yes.
Very good. Excellent. All right. Well, from the committee for president, that is a 3-year term from 2022 to 2024. The committee puts forward the name of John D. Grabenstein. Now, Dr. Grabenstein's credentials have been previously noted today, and they are available on the AIHP website. Now, for our board member at large for 3-year terms, 2022 to 2024, the committee puts forward the name of John E. Clarke. Professor Clarke is an assistant professor at the University of South Florida College of Pharmacy, where he also serves as the director of experiential education and pharmacy residency programs. He is also a clinical pharmacist and faculty preceptor in ambulatory care at the USF Health Center. Bridge is the building and initiative dedicated to gaining equality healthcare clinic. Dr. Clarke earned a BS in pharmacy from Texas Southern University College of Pharmacy and a PharmD from Florida A&M University. He earned an MS in pharmaceutical administration from Wayne State University, my father's alma mater, and completed his residency training at Detroit General Hospital. Professor Clarke is a past president of the Association of Black Health Systems Pharmacists and has been a vocal advocate for the creation of culturally competent systems of care and reducing health disparities and increasing ethnic and cultural diversity in the workplace. At ASHP's 2019 mid-year clinical meeting, he received the ASHP-ABHP Joint Leadership Award. Professor Clarke has a deep and active interest in the history of pharmacy, as evidenced by his longtime membership in AIHP. His current projects include a historical review of the contributions of African American women in pharmacy and an analysis of the ways early and now defunct African American pharmacy schools impacted health disparities. He presented papers on these topics at the 44th International Congress for the History of Pharmacy. He and AIHP Assistant Director Gregory Bond have collaborated on several projects, including a February 2020 podcast sponsored by ASHP about the history of pharmacy education at historically Black colleges and universities. Additional information about Dr. Clarke is also available on the AIHP website. As Dennis mentioned, Article 5, Section 2 of the AIHP bylaws stipulates that additional nominations may be made at the annual business meeting by any individual member in attendance, seconded by 2 additional members.
Okay, thank you, Greg, and thank you, Angie. Are there any additional nominees? Please indicate by raising your hand, unmuting your computer, or entering in the chat. Okay, well, hearing none, I now declare the nominations are closed. Those elected will assume their positions in November of 2021. More complete biographical information on the candidates can be found on the AIHP website. And now moving on to the installation of new officers. The new officer and board member we are about to install were elected earlier this year and will begin their service at the conclusion of this annual business meeting. The following individual has been elected by Institute members as an officer. Serving a 3-year term as secretary is Robert Berkey, the Ohio State University College of Pharmacy Professor Emeritus. Dr. Berkey's accomplishments and qualifications have been previously noted today and are on the AIHP website. The following individual has been elected by Institute members as an at-large member of the Board of Directors. To serve a 3-year term is Dr. Catherine A. Taglieri from the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences University, or better known now as MCPHS University. Dr. Taglieri is a licensed pharmacist and associate professor of pharmacy practice at MCPHS. And she has practiced in a variety of pharmacy settings, including community, consulting, and long-term care. She received both a BS in pharmacy and a PharmD from MCPHS University. Professor Taglieri has served on AIHP's board of directors since 2018. For the past 10 years, she has served as one of the faculty coordinators for the introductory and advanced practice courses and pharmacy skills lab. In 2018, she was awarded the Trustees Award for Teaching Excellence. Her area of research is primarily in the scholarship of teaching and learning, but she has also provided abstracts and brief articles in the field of pharmaceutics and the history of pharmacy. I will now ask each of these individuals to affirm that they understand the duties of the position to which they have been elected, that they promise to fulfill those duties to the best of their ability, and that they will work faithfully to help AIHP fulfill its purposes. As I call your name, please indicate by saying "I do" to so affirm. Robert Berkey?
I do.
Thank you, Bob. Catherine Taglieri?
I do.
Thank you, Catherine. I hereby announce that these two individuals have been duly installed to their positions on the AIHP Board of Directors. Congratulations, and thank you for agreeing to serve on the governing body of the Institute. Moving on to new business. This is the opportunity for attendees to discuss or ask questions on anything concerning AIHP. And again, we ask you to use the chat function or raise your hand or unmute your mic as you so desire. Or any new business?
Hey, Clarke.
Yes.
This is Melissa Corrigan, AIHP board member.
Yes, Melissa.
I just wanted to thank everyone for their reports today and to tie back to some of the comments that Luke made about greater engagement of our members in AIHP. I want to bring to our members and attendees' attention today that last month was American Pharmacist Month, and we also celebrated Women Pharmacists Day. And I'm really grateful to be able to do an interview on my podcast, the Melissa X Scripts podcast, with AIHP member and longtime supporter of pharmacy history, Metaloo Henderson. And I know Metalou's on the call today, so I just want to acknowledge, her. And AIHP has shared information about the podcast on its website. And if you hadn't had a chance to listen, I would encourage you to learn more from Metaloo about Zeta Cooper, about Gloria Frankie, and then the amazing history of the sister pharmacists and the difference that they've made in pharmacy over the years. So we hope that, others will continue thinking about ways to become engaged. And I want to say a special thank you to Metaloo.
Very good. Thank you, Melissa. And that's great work that you're doing with your podcasts. Any other business?
Clarke, this is John Greatenstein.
Yes, Sean.
You alluded to it in your presentation, but I think it's worth repeating. We're living history now with this pandemic. It's been 100 years, over 100 years since the country has faced anything like what we're facing now. And so many of the attendees are parts of institutions that hopefully are writing down contemporaneously what's happening. It needs to be archived, so that it can be assessed later of what worked, what didn't work, what could, where people were proactive, what more could have been done. So it's really important for us to document that now, so that those who follow after us can analyze.
Absolutely, John. And thank you for that. We are truly living in historical times. And please go to the AIHP website to get information on how you can contribute to the COVID-19 project. Other business or comments? Well, before we adjourn, I wish to thank all of our speakers for their reports, to our staff, Dennis, Luke, Greg, Bond, Beth Fisher, Kristen Husett, for all the time and efforts that went in behind the scenes for putting together today's meeting, and to all of our attendees for taking the time to making AIHP a part of your day. Having completed the scheduled order of business and hearing there is no further business for the Assembly to consider at this time, I now declare this meeting adjourned. Stay well, and we will reconvene via teleconference next fall. The exact date to be announced shortly. Thank you.